Hi there, I'm Sumit Bansal, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to use the reduce function in Excel. Now reduce is one of the harder functions and it confuses a lot of people. So in this video I'm going to simplify this function for you and show you a lot of examples so you would know exactly when to use it and how to use it. So let's get started. So let me first start by explaining the syntax of the reduce function, and then I will show you one simple example that will make it clear how this function works. So the reduce function takes three arguments. Now, first thing to know about this function is that it is a lambda helper function, which means that it is going to use a lambda function within the reduce function. Now, if you do not know what a lambda function is, I've done a separate video on it and I leave the link in the description so you can watch the video. Now, the reduce function takes three arguments. The first one is an initial value. So when the reduce function is doing the calculation, it does not know where to start. So we can specify the starting point. In most cases, you'll see people using 0 as the initial value, where the output is a numerical value. So it starts with 0 and does some calculation and then returns the final output. The second argument is an array. This is the range of cells on which we want to do the calculation. And the third argument is the function, which is going to be the lambda function. Now here are a couple of things you need to know about the reduce function. First of all, it is going to return one single value. So it is going to go through a range of cells, then do a calculation that you would specify in the third argument, which is a lambda function. And then after all the calculation is done, it is going to return one single value. Now, let me actually explain this with an example so that you would understand how this formula works. So here, what I have is a range of these cells that have these numbers, and I want to add these numbers. Now, obviously, I shouldn't be using the reduce function here because there is already an inbuilt function to do this, which is the sum function, where I can just select these cells and I hit enter and it gives me the result. But I will create a reduce function to tell you how this is going to work and how the reduce function works. Now, taking a step back, when I use the sum function, what is happening is in the back end, sum function is going to start with 0 because it doesn't know what are the values in these cells. Then it is going to go through each of these cells and then it is going to add these numbers. So it starts with 0, then it goes to this cell 1 and it adds 0 to 1 and then returns the result as 1. But because we have chosen so many cells, it is going to go to 1, then 2 and add that to the result, then 1 plus 2 plus 3. So that becomes the result and so on. And this is exactly how the reduce function also works. So let me actually create the reduce function here. So I have this reduce function. The initial value is going to be 0 because my intent here is to add all of these numbers. But because I've not specified anything, the initial value is 0. Then the array is going to be all these cells because this is the range of cells in which I have the values that I want to add. Now, as of now, reduce does not know what to do. What needs to be done is specified as the third argument, which is the function argument. And here we are going to use the lambda function. Now, the lambda function in this case uses a very specific format. The first two arguments are always going to be the same, and these are the accumulator value and the current value. The accumulator value is a variable that is going to hold the result and it is going to give you the final result. And the current value is the current value in this range. Now, for the ease of this, I'm just going to use A and V, but you can use any argument you want. If you want, you can use ACC and current CURR, or you can type the entire word, does not matter. This is just a variable that is going to hold the values. So A is an accumulator that is going to hold the result, and V is a variable that is going to hold the current value. Now, because we are starting with 0, when this function is being executed, the lambda function, A's value automatically becomes 0 because that is the starting point. And then there are going to be multiple iterations where it is going to go through all of these cells, and whatever function I specify here is going to be applied on all of these cells. So the function that I'm going to apply here is A plus V. Now this is what happens. Let me hit enter. It gives me the exact same result, which is 55. Now let me quickly explain this by going through all of these steps. So I've already mentioned these steps here, where what happens is when it is starting out, because we specified the initial value here as 0. So in this case, because I specified the initial value as 0, this becomes the value for this variable A. So this value here is passed on to this variable a here. In this case, it is passed on to this variable. And once this is passed on, the lambda function works where a is 0, v is going to be whatever value is there in this range 1 by 1, and then the calculation is done. So when it is around 1, which is the first iteration, the value of a is 0, which is the initial value. The value of v is 1 because it takes the value from here, and the result is 0 plus 1 because this is what I specified here in the lambda function. Then for the next iteration, the value of a becomes 1 because it takes the value of the result. The value of a becomes 1, the value of v is 2, these two are added, the result is 3. For the third iteration, the value of a becomes 3, the value in the cell is 3, these two are added, and the result is 6. And that is how it'll keep on going till it has covered all the cells, and finally we get the result as 55. So as I mentioned, it will give you one single result. It doesn't give you all of these intermediate steps. It does all the calculation within itself and only gives you the final result. Now, let me show you a couple of examples that will make this even clearer. So here I have this data where I have these products and these sales, and I want to only add those sales values where the sale value is more than 50. Now I know that there is a function called SUMIF or SUMIFs that can easily do this, but let's do this using the reduce function so that I can show you a slight variation of creating the lambda function, and then we'll jump on to examples where reduce function actually really shines. So in this example, let's make the function. So it's reduce. The initial value is going to be 0 because it's a numerical result that we are expecting. We would start with 0. Now you do not have to start with 0 always. You can start with any number, and you can also start with a null string if you expect the output to be a text value. So initial value here is 0. The array is going to be this. Then I have to create the lambda function, which would have a and v, a comma v, where a is going to hold the accumulator variable, and v is going to be the value that will have the current value. And then I have to write the formula that is going to be applied to all of these cells in this range. And in this case, that formula is going to be if the current value, which is v, which are all of these values, if this value is greater than 50. If this happens, then I want the accumulator value, which is going to be started with 0. I want the value in the current cell to be added to the accumulator value. So it would be a plus v. But if that is not the case, then I do not want to add the current value. So it would just be a. And now when I hit enter, it gives me this result. And this is the right result because I've actually checked before making the video. But here is again how it works. This is going to start with 0. The lambda function says that if the value in this cell is more than 50, then it should be added to this variable, which is a plus v. Else it should only give you a. So the output after the first iteration is going to be 0 because this is less than 50. Then second iteration, the value is going to be 0 still. Third iteration again 0, but for the fourth iteration, the value of a is going to become 82.5 because that is the result, the output of the lambda function. So it gets stored in a. Then we go again to the next cell. Doesn't happen, nothing happens because this is less than 50. When it comes here, 82.5 is added to 82.7, and then this entire combined value gets stored in a. Then this value is added, then this is added, then this is added, and this one, last one, is ignored. So this is how the reduce function works. Now the thing I wanted to show you in this case is that in the last part of the lambda function, which is the parameter, the calculation, you can use any function you want. You can use any formula and create your lambda function. So this is actually the part where the magic happens. So now let's see some examples where reduce function can actually do things that you cannot do with regular functions in Excel. So here I have this data where I have these customer names and these orders, and you can see that in each order I have a country code, then a dash, and then the number. And I want to add all of these numbers for all of these country codes. So I have the country code US here. I want to get all the sales for US. So I want to add this cell and this one and this one and this one and these two. So I want to add all of these cells, and not just the cells, only the numeric part of these cells, and then get the result here, and then do the same thing for EU and UK and AU. Now, to do this, obviously you can first take this data, split it, then check whether it is US or not, and then only add the values for it, maybe using by a function like SUMIF. But we are going to do this using just one single reduce function. So let's create that formula. In the reduce formula, I'm going to start with an initial value which is going to be 0, because then this is added to whatever numbers are here in these cells. So we start with 0, and then the array is going to be all of these cells. Now this means that I'm going to go through each of these cells one by one and apply whatever function I apply as the lambda function. So here I would have the lambda function where the first two arguments always remain a comma v, comma v. You can use any name you want. This is the accumulator value. Because I have used 0 as the initial value, the initial value of a is going to be 0, but as we move to the next cell after each computation, this value a will keep on changing based on whatever function we specify. V is always going to be the current value, so it is going to be US-5500 first, then EU-7200, and so on. Now here is the function that the formula that we are going to create, and this is where actually everything happens. So I'm going to use an if formula where I would first use text before, and now the text in which I want to extract the text before, because I want to check whether the cell has US or EU or what country code it has. So it is going to be V. V is the current cell that is being computed. For the first round, it is going to be cell B2, then B3 and B4 and so on. And then the delimiter in this case is going to be dash. So this is going to extract the country code before the hyphen, and I would say if this is equal to D2, now you can't see D2, but D2 has the region code which is US. If this is equal to US, then I want to get the number which is after the US. So I'm going to again use text after. So text after with V. V is the current cell which is going to be cell B2 in the beginning. Then the delimiter is going to be hyphen, and this will give me the number. But I just don't want the number. I also want to add it to the accumulator. I have to do this because then this value is going to be saved to the accumulator value for each cell iteration. And if this is not the case, if it is not equal to the value in cell D2, which means that if the text before the dash is not equal to US, I do not want to add the value. I just want to return the initial value, which is 0. So I would use A here. See what happens? When I hit enter, it gives me 37700. Now let me quickly explain what is happening here. When we use this formula, let me explain this here in the formula bar. So in this case, this part is clear, should be clear, because this is the standard part where 0 is the initial value. It could be anything but 0 in this case, then the range of cells, and then the lambda function with A and V. But this is where the magic is happening, the if function. Now if function uses text before and then uses the current cell, which is in the first iteration US-5500. Then it extracts the text before the hyphen, which is US, and it checks if this is equal to this value here, US or not. So this is going to either return a true or a false. And then if this is a true, it adds A, which initially has 0, to the value after the dash, which is 5500. If it is not US, it is going to just return whatever is the initial value, which is A. So what happens is after first iteration, the value of A becomes 5500. Then it moves to the next cell because this is EU. The condition doesn't match, nothing happens. When it goes to this cell US, condition matches, so it becomes 5500 plus 4800. Then moves to the next cell, nothing happens. Then for US it becomes 5500 plus 4800, which is already stored in the variable A, and adds 8200 to it. So while it has done all the computation, it only adds the values which is for US. But I also want values for all of these countries, not just this one. I do not have to copy the formula down. I can just come here, and instead of D2, I can use D2 is to D5. And thanks to dynamic arrays, it is going to give us the result. So you can see this is not really a very long or complicated formula, but with one single formula, we have saved a lot of intermediate steps where the function itself, the function within the lambda itself does all the calculation, and the reduce function makes sure that we get one single value as the result. Now, one more thing, I mentioned that with reduce, you would always get one single value, but in this case, we are getting 4 values because we are using this part here. So it does not mean that reduce is always going to return one single value in one single cell. It means that it is going to return one value, which could be an array that spills. Now let's look at another interesting example. So here I have these names data set, and you can see I have the name followed by the country, and I want to combine all of the names for a given country. So for US, I want all of these names together in one single cell, maybe separated by a comma. So to do that, I again would have to do something similar to what I did in the last example, but in the previous example, it was numerical value. In this case, it is going to be text value. So let's see how to do this. So I'm going to use the reduce function where the initial value in this case is going to be a null string. And the reason for this is because the output that I expect from this formula is a string which is a string of names. So because I expect an output which is a string, I would start with something which is also a string as the initial value. So if I start with 0 here, I could face an issue. So I would start with a null string. Then in array, I'm going to select all of these cells. So these are the cells on which the reduce function is going to go through one by one and then apply the function, whatever function I apply as the lambda function. So here, let's use the lambda function. The first two arguments are going to be the same a comma v accumulator and the current value. And then the third argument is going to be the formula that is going to give us the result. Now in this case, we are again going to use an if formula and check whether the value after the name, after the comma, is the country code in this cell, in cell C2 or not. So here I'm going to use text after, where the text is going to be V, which is the current cell, and the delimiter in this case is going to be comma followed by a space character. So what this is going to do me, text after function, it is going to give me the country, which is US or France or India. Now in this case, I want to check whether this is equal to this country or not. So if it is equal to US or not. Now if it is equal to US, then I want to concatenate all of these names. So in this case, I would come here and I would say start with the initial value, which is null string here. So start with A and then concatenate. So I'm going to use the ampersand sign, concatenate with a comma followed by a space character. And then I'm going to add the name. Now I do not have the name already, so I would have to extract the name, and that can be done by using the text before function where the current cell is V and the name that I want to extract here is this name John Smith. So I would use V, but the delimiter is comma. And if the country is not US, so in this case I said if the country is US, give me this combined name, but if it is not US, I would just return the initial value, which is A. And now if I come here and I hit enter, you can see I have all these names. I've got it. It's not in the right format, but I've at least got all the names together, where I have John Smith here, then Sarah Johnson, then Michael Chen, and all of these names. But I do have a leading comma followed by a space character, which is actually a very simple problem to solve. I can just come here and use a substitute function where this is my value and the old value in this case is going to be comma followed by a space character, and I want to replace it with null. But in this case, I just want to make sure that I'm only replacing the first instance, because I do not want to replace the instances where the names are being combined with a comma followed by a space character. So I would put the instance number as 1. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the names followed by comma and then space character and then all of these names together. Now I do not want to do it for all of these countries one by one or copy the formula down. So what I would do is instead of C2, you can just use C2 colon C4, and it gives you the result for all of these countries. So you can see I have US and all the names concatenated for US, and same for India and same for France. Let me quickly go through the formula again. The reduce function, the reduce formula here starts with a blank, a null character. Then it has this range which are all of these cells. And then there is a lambda function where within the lambda function we checks for a condition if the country code, which we extract by using the text after function where the delimiter is comma followed by a space character. If this country code is equal to the country mentioned here in this cell, I extract the name using text before and add it concatenated with our initial string, with our initial value, which is a null string. So after the first iteration, I would just have John Smith, but then it goes to the next cell. Because this does not match US, I would have nothing. But after the third cell, I would have John Smith, comma, Sarah Johnson. Then after fourth cell, nothing here. And then after sixth name, I would have John Smith, Sarah Johnson, and Michael Chen, and so on. And the same thing happens for all of these countries. Now here is an example where reduce function actually is very useful. So here I have this data and I want to split this data. So I have the street, city, state, zip, and country in individual cells. Now if I come here and I use the text split function, I can do this. So I can select this cell and then specify the column delimiter as comma followed by the space character, and now when I hit enter, it gives me the result for the first address. But if I have to do it for all of these cells, I either would have to copy this formula down like this, else the other thing I can try is if I change A2 from A2 is to A13, which has all the cells, see what happens. When I hit enter, it gives me the result in the first column, but it doesn't spill here on the right. And the reason for this is all the dynamic formulas, they can only spill in one direction, either down or to the right. They cannot spill in both the directions. And this is a limitation, which means that I cannot use one single text split formula to get the result here. So in this case, I'm going to use a reduce function. So let's use the reduce function here, where I would start with a null string because I expect the output to be a string. And then these are the cells, which is the array. And then I would have the lambda function where a comma v, a is the accumulator, v is going to be the current value. And then in this case, I can do the split. But what I'm going to do is after each iteration, when a split is done, and as I showed you, text split can only do the split horizontally, but not vertically. If I use text split, what I can do is I can pile up these values. I can combine these values using a vstack function. So let me first show you the formula and then I'll explain how it works. So I would use the vstack function where I start with the initial value, which is a blank string, and then I would use the text split, the same text split function I just showed you a few seconds ago, where the text is going to be v, which is the current cell, and the column delimiter is going to be comma followed by a space character. And now if I hit enter, this is the result I get. Now, I'm almost there. There is a problem. You can see that the first row is not fine, but you can see that this is exactly the result I expect. I just have an additional extra row that I need to get rid of. So to do that, I'm going to just use the drop function. And at the end, I would say drop the first row. And I have my result. Now let me quickly explain what's happening here. In the lambda function, it starts with the accumulator value, which is a null string. Then it goes through each of these cells, and then within that there is a vstack function. And the reason for this is that when it goes through each of these cells, it is going to split this cell into this here, but then the vstack function is going to make sure that after the next cell, these two cells get combined. So vstack is going to combine them. Then when it goes to the third cell, it is going to split, but then vstack is going to combine these three and then these four and these five and so on. So by the time we go to the end, vstack would have combined all of these. So while we are still getting one single result, as I mentioned in the beginning, while we're still getting the one single result, that one single result is actually the vertically stacked result that we get after using the vstack function. Now, because we started our formula initially with a null string, we get an additional row because that is the first thing that vstack uses, and then it uses this cell. This is why we have to use the drop function to drop the first row so that we can get our result. Now in this example, I have these movie genres and I want to get the unique genre here. So I want to have action, then comedy, then romantic, then action, then thriller, and so on. Now in this case, there is obviously duplication, and another thing is that I have two words. So first I have to split these words, then I have to combine them vertically, then I have to find only the unique genres. Now this is something that can be done with one single reduce function. So let me show you how it works. So here I'm going to create the function, and I would start with reduce, where the initial value in this case is going to be a null string because the output I expect is a string. So I start with a null string. Then these are the cells on which I want to run my lambda. And then I would use the lambda function where the argument is going to be a comma v. And then I would have to somehow split them, then vertically stack them, and then apply a unique formula over the result so that I only have the unique genre. So in this case, I would use the vstack function, and this is very similar to the formula we just saw in the previous example. Now in the vstack one, I would start with the initial value, which is this value here. So I would start with a because that is stored in the variable a. So I start with a, and then I would stack it with the text split result of the current cell, and the split I want is based on the delimiter, which is a space character. So if I just use this and hit enter, you can see I get this result here. Now the problem in this case is that I am splitting the text in a row, but I need to split the text in a column. So what I'm going to do is go back and just add another column, because you see this is a column delimiter, but if I make it a row delimiter, see what happens when I hit enter. It gives me the result, but it gives me the result in one single column. Now this is actually very easy to solve, because all I have to do is first find all the unique genres. So I can just use the unique function around the reduce function. It gives me all the unique genres, but I still have one blank cell, and that is because I started with an empty string and that was assigned to the variable a, and then a is used within vstack. So vstack always starts with a blank string in this case. So I can just use the drop function and drop the first one. And that's it. You can see I have the result. Now what is happening in this case is reduce function is going through all of them, but while it is going through them, it is first using the text split function to split them. So action and comedy is going to split and then be placed in two separate cells in a column. Then it is going to do it for all of them, but when this is split, it then adds the next one below them because of the vstack function. So these are vertically stacked. First they are split, put in separate cells in a column, then all of them are stacked together. Then I use the unique function to get all the unique genres, and then I use the drop function to drop the first cell, which was blank. Now here is an advanced use case of the reduce function, and it will show you the kind of things that you can do with the reduce function that you cannot do with any other function in Excel. So in this case, I have these names and I have these training codes, and I want to replace these training codes with the actual training name. So I have Excel as XL, and I want to replace it with the word Excel, and I have PPT and I want to replace it with PowerPoint, and so on. Now, so far we have seen that we go through each cell and then we do a computation within each cell. But in this case, we are actually doing multiple replacements within each cell itself. So I need to go through each element of the cell as well. So I need to go through all of these cells, but at the same time, I need to go through all of these codes, which is Excel, PPT, WD, TS, and replace them with the word. So I'm going to use the reduce function to do this, and I'm going to do all of this with one single formula. So here is the reduce function, the initial value in this case. Now, so far the initial value has been either 0 or a null string, because that was the starting point. But in this case, my starting point is actually these cells. Why? Because I would start with this cell and then I would check whether a replacement needs to be done in this cell or not. And if the replacement needs to be done, then I'm going to do it. So let's actually do one thing. Let's start simple. Let's start with cell B2. Now, I need to make the replacement, so I'm going to choose the array, the cells through which I need to go through one by one, which are going to be these cells here. So what I'm going to do is start with Excel, PPT, and then go through these words and see if these words appear in this cell or not. If they do, I want to replace them with these new words, which is the actual name of the training. So this is my array. And then we are going to create the function. Let's create that function lambda a, v. And now we are going to go through each element in this cell. So to do that, I'm going to use the substitute function, and within substitute function, I'm going to first start with the text in the cell, which is A, because A has this cell value, which is Excel, PPT. And then I'm going to replace the old text. Now, old text in this case is going to be the codes here that you cannot see on the screen, but the codes that are there in E2 to E5, which is Excel, then PPT in the next cell, and then WD, and then TS. Now, I am going to use an XLOOKUP function because I need to replace V, which is the current value of the cell, which is the Excel or PPT or whatever code there is, with the word corresponding to that training. So here I'm going to use XLOOKUP. My lookup value in this case is the value in V, which is in E2 to E5. My lookup array is E2 to E5, and my return array are these names here. And if I hit enter, you can see I have got the result. I have Excel, PowerPoint. Now let me quickly explain what is happening. We started with this cell as our starting point. In the reduce function, this B2 cell is the starting point, and instead of iterating through these cells, we're actually iterating through the cells here in this range. So now we have E2 to E5, which is the range through which we are going to iterate. And then we have the lambda function a comma v. And then within the substitute function, we start with a, because a is the text that needs to be replaced, which is this text here. Within this text, what we need to replace is this word Excel, and we need to replace it with the word Excel. So it is going to go through V one by one. First, V is going to be Excel, then it is going to be PPT, then WD, then TS, and it is going to look up the value. And if that is found in this cell, it is going to be replaced. And this is how it gives us the result. But I want to get it for all the cells. And here is the beauty. Instead of B2, if I use B2 to B11, it is going to give me the result for all of these cells. So you can see this is not a very long formula. It's just the concept of reduce can be a bit tricky, but if you understand how the iteration is happening and how it is going through each cell and how it's making the replacement, this is actually a simple formula that is doing something that would be very difficult to do with other Excel functions or formulas or VBA codes. That's it in this video. I hope you found this useful. I hope I have been able to simplify the reduce function for you so that you can start using it. And the more you use this function, the easier it would get. Thank you and have a nice day.